My name is Richard M. Carter, and I was born in the fall of 1962 in a small town called Fremont, Ohio. Back then, Fremont wasn't much more than a few dusty roads, a diner that served burnt coffee, and a population that knew each other's secrets better than their own dreams. My father, Harold Carter, was a carpenter with calloused hands and a quiet soul. My mother, Ruth, taught third grade at the local school and believed in the power of books more than sermons. We weren't poor, but we weren't far from it either. Our house had creaky floors, a leaky roof, and a fireplace that coughed more than it warmed. But it was home. I remember winter mornings when the frost painted flowers on the windows, and my mother would wrap me in two sweaters before sending me off to school. I didn't know what wealth was. I thought happiness was a bowl of oatmeal and my father humming old country tunes while fixing the porch. From a young age, I was curious. Not the kind of curiosity that gets you in trouble, but the kind that makes you ask why the milkman always looked tired or why Mr. Thompson's store never had customers. I watched people. I listened. I learned. At 14, I got my first job sweeping floors at a hardware store. Mr. Jenkins paid me $1.25 an hour and taught me how to count nails faster than anyone in town. I saved every penny, not because I had a plan, but because I knew someday I'd need it. By 17, I was restless. Fremont felt too small for the dreams I hadn't even dared to speak aloud. I wanted more, not just money, but meaning. I wanted to build something that lasted longer than a wooden fence or a school report card. So I packed a duffel bag, kissed my mother on the cheek, shook my father's hand, and boarded a Greyhound bus to Chicago. Chicago was chaos. The buildings were taller than anything I'd seen, and the people moved like they were late for something important. I rented a room in a shared hostel with peeling wallpaper and a broken heater. I worked at a hot dog stand during the day and cleaned offices at night. I didn't complain. I was learning. I read books, business, psychology, biographies. I studied the way people made decisions, how they sold ideas, how they failed and got back up. I didn't have a mentor, but I had hunger. And hunger, I've learned, is the best teacher. One night, while delivering supplies to a warehouse, I overheard two men arguing about a shipment delay. One of them said, "If we had our own truck, we wouldn't be at their mercy." That sentence stuck with me. It was the seed. Within 6 months, I had borrowed $5,000 from a community credit union, bought a used van, and started my own delivery service. I called it Carter Freight Solutions. It wasn't fancy. I printed flyers at a library and handed them out to local stores. But I showed up on time, every time. I smiled. I listened. And slowly, people started calling. By 24, I had 3 vans, 2 employees, and a growing list of clients. I wasn't rich, not yet, but I was building something mine. And then, at a logistics expo in Dallas, I met her. It was the spring of 1990 when I met Linda. I was 28, running Carter Freight Solutions with 5 trucks and a growing team. I had just landed a contract with a regional supermarket chain, and they invited me to a logistics expo in Dallas. I wasn't expecting much, just a few handshakes and maybe a free pen or two, but then I saw her. She was standing by a booth labeled Brand Bridge Marketing, explaining something to a group of executives with the kind of confidence that made you stop and listen. Her voice was calm, her eyes sharp, and her smile, well, it had the power to silence a room. I introduced myself, awkwardly, fumbling over my words like a teenager. She laughed, not mockingly, but kindly. That laugh stayed with me. We had coffee the next morning, then dinner, then long phone calls that stretched into the night. Linda wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant. She understood business, people, and me. She challenged my ideas, pushed me to think bigger, and reminded me that success wasn't just about profit, it was about purpose. We got married later that year in a small ceremony under an oak tree in Austin. I wore a borrowed suit. She wore a simple white dress, and we danced barefoot on the grass. It was perfect. In 1991, our son Jacob was born. I remember holding him for the first time. his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, his eyes blinking at the world. I cried. Linda laughed. And in that moment, I felt like the richest man alive. Life was full. I worked hard, but I came home to warmth. Linda would read to Jacob every night, and I'd sit beside them, pretending not to tear up at goodnight moon. We took road trips, built pillow forts, and made pancakes on Sundays. Jacob was curious, like me, but gentler, more thoughtful. Linda said he had her heart and my stubbornness. She was probably right. But happiness, I've learned, is fragile. In late 1997, Linda started feeling tired. At first, we thought it was stress. Then came the bruises, the fevers, the weight loss. The diagnosis was acute myeloid leukemia. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, holding her hand as he explained the prognosis. It felt like the walls were closing in. She fought. Chemotherapy, hospital stays, experimental treatments. We tried everything. I spent nights by her bedside, reading her favorite poems, playing her favorite songs. Jacob, just 6, would draw pictures and tape them to the hospital wall. "Get well soon, Mommy," he wrote in shaky letters. But the disease was relentless. On a rainy morning in October 1998, Linda took her last breath. I was there, holding her hand, whispering that I loved her. She smiled, weakly, and said, "Take care of our boy." Then she was gone. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. I had to be strong for Jacob. But at night, when he was asleep, I'd sit alone in the living room, staring at the empty chair where Linda used to read. The silence was deafening. Jacob changed too. He stopped asking questions, stopped laughing. He'd sit by the window, watching the rain, as if waiting for someone to come back. I tried to reach him, but I was drowning myself. In grief, in guilt, in work. I expanded the business, opened new branches, made more money than I knew what to do with. But none of it mattered. My house was bigger, but my heart was hollow. Linda had once told me, "Success means nothing if you lose yourself along the way." I didn't understand it then, but I did now. After Linda's death, I buried myself in work, not because I loved it, but because I didn't know how else to survive. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't knock on your door politely. It barges in, rearranges your life, and leaves you staring at walls that used to mean something. Jacob was only 7. He needed me, but I was broken. I told myself that building the business was for him, that every deal, every expansion, every sleepless night was for his future. But deep down, I was running, from pain, from memories, from the silence Linda left behind. Carter Freight Solutions grew fast. I opened branches in Houston, Denver, and Atlanta. We moved into international shipping, partnered with tech firms, and automated our logistics. By the time I turned 40, I was worth over $10 million. I had a penthouse in Chicago, a vacation home in Colorado, and a team of executives who called me Sir. But Jacob didn't call me much. He was quiet, reserved, brilliant. He loved computers, built websites, and spent hours coding in his room. I tried to connect, bought him gadgets, took him on trips, even hired tutors to support his interests. But I missed the one thing he truly needed: time. One evening, I came home early and found him sitting alone at the dinner table. His plate was untouched. I asked him what was wrong. He looked up and said, "I don't know you anymore." That hit harder than any business failure ever could. I tried to change. I started coming home earlier, attending his school events, asking about his projects. But the damage was done. He was polite, respectful, but distant, like a guest in my own house. Still, I kept building. I told myself that someday he'd understand, that when he saw the empire I built, he'd be proud, that money could fix what time had broken. In 2003, I was invited to speak at a global logistics summit in New York. I stood on stage, shared my journey, and received a standing ovation. Reporters called me the Freight King. Investors flooded my inbox. I should have felt triumphant. But that night, in my hotel room, I stared at the ceiling and realized I had no one to call, no one to share the moment with. Jacob was away at college, and we hadn't spoken in weeks. Success, I learned, is loud, but loneliness is louder. By 2003, I had everything a man could want, except peace. My company was thriving, my bank account was overflowing, but my home was still quiet. Jacob had graduated high school and was off to MIT, studying computer science. We spoke occasionally, but the warmth was missing. He was polite, distant, and always busy. I didn't blame him. I had taught him, unintentionally, that distance was normal. That's when I met Elise. She was introduced to me at a charity gala in Chicago. She was elegant, articulate, and had a calming presence that felt like a balm to my restless soul. She worked in non-profit fundraising and had a teenage son named Daniel. We talked for hours that night about art, travel, and the loneliness that success often brings. Within 6 months, we were married. I thought I was getting a second chance at family. Elise moved into my home, and Daniel, just 16, came with her. He was bright, confident, and charming. At first, he and Jacob got along well. They played video games, shared music, and even worked on a small coding project together. I felt hopeful. But slowly, things shifted. Elise had strong opinions about how the house should be run, how Jacob should behave, even how my business should operate. She wasn't cruel, but she was controlling. Jacob, never one to argue, began spending more time at school and less time at home. Daniel, on the other hand, thrived under Elise's attention. She praised him constantly, encouraged his ambitions, and subtly positioned him as the future of our family. I didn't notice the divide at first. I was busy expanding into Europe, negotiating mergers, and attending board meetings. But one evening, Jacob pulled me aside and said, "Dad, I don't feel like I belong here anymore." I was stunned. I told him he was wrong, that this was his home, but he just smiled sadly and said, "Not really. Not since Elise came." He moved out the following year, renting a small apartment near campus. I visited occasionally, but the conversations were short. He was building something, his own tech startup, and I was proud, even if I didn't say it enough. Meanwhile, Daniel became more involved in my business. Elise insisted he intern at the company, shadow executives, and attend strategy meetings. He was smart, no doubt, but he lacked humility. He spoke like he already owned the place. I ignored the warning signs. I wanted to believe that this new family could work, that Elise loved me, that Daniel respected me, that Jacob would come around. But families built on imbalance eventually collapse. I was 60 years old when the cracks finally gave way. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Carter Freight Solutions had expanded into Asia. Daniel was officially appointed as COO, and Elise was hosting charity dinners in our name. We were featured in magazines, invited to exclusive events, and praised as a model modern family. But behind the scenes, something was rotting. Daniel had grown bold, too bold. He made decisions without consulting me, restructured departments, and began shifting company assets. Elise defended him at every turn. "He's just ambitious," she'd say. "You should be proud." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that Daniel was simply eager to prove himself. But I had built this company from the ground up. I knew its heartbeat. And something felt wrong. One afternoon, I received a call from our CFO. He sounded nervous. "Richard," he said, "you need to see this." What I saw made my stomach drop. Daniel had quietly transferred ownership of several key subsidiaries to shell companies, companies he controlled. He had sold off properties, rerouted funds, and even changed internal policies to block my access. Elise's name appeared on several documents. My signature had been forged. I confronted them that evening. Elise sat calmly, sipping wine. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You're old," he said. "You built something great, but it's time to let go." I couldn't speak. My hands trembled. The woman I had trusted, the boy I had raised as my own, they had gutted me, not just financially, but emotionally. They had taken everything, my company, my reputation, my legacy. I tried to fight back, hired lawyers, filed complaints, called in favors, but Daniel had covered his tracks well. Elise played innocent, claiming she had no idea. The board sided with him. I was forced to resign. I moved into a modest apartment in Florida. No staff, no luxury, no headlines. Just me, a few boxes, and the echo of betrayal. Jacob called once. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't want him to carry my burden. But he knew. He always knew. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "You didn't deserve this." I wanted to say it was okay, that I'd recover. But I couldn't lie to him. I had lost everything I had spent a lifetime building, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker remained. A quiet voice that whispered, "This isn't the end." I was living in a modest apartment in Florida, stripped of everything I had built. My company, my wealth, my reputation. Daniel had taken it all, and Elise had stood by him. I felt like a ghost of the man I used to be. Then, one evening, I heard a knock on the door. It was Jacob. He stood there in a tailored suit, his eyes sharp, his posture confident. He looked like a man who had faced storms and learned how to walk through them. I hadn't seen him in months. "Dad," he said, stepping inside. "I know everything. I'm going to fix this." I didn't know what to say. I had tried to shield him from the betrayal, but he had found out anyway. And unlike me, he wasn't going to sit quietly. Jacob had been building his own tech company, JMC Systems, an AI-powered logistics platform that was revolutionizing supply chains. He had investors lining up, clients from Fortune 500 companies, and a reputation for being both brilliant and ethical. He didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to do it right. Within a year, JMC Systems went public. Jacob became one of the youngest CEOs in Silicon Valley. But he didn't stop there. He began buying shares of Carter Freight Solutions, quietly, strategically. He spoke to board members, exposed Daniel's mismanagement, and revealed forged documents and shady transfers. Elise's name came up in several investigations. Jacob froze her accounts and filed legal action against both of them. Daniel tried to fight back. He called Jacob, asking for a meeting. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Jacob looked him in the eye and said, "Because you stole from the wrong man, and you hurt the only person who ever truly built something." Daniel was removed from the company. Elise disappeared from the board, and Carter Freight Solutions was renamed JMC Logistics, a tribute to both Jacob's vision and the legacy I had started decades ago. Then Jacob came to see me again. He handed me a folder. Inside were documents restoring my name, my shares, and a letter from the board welcoming me back as honorary founder. "I didn't do this for revenge," Jacob said. "I did it because you deserve better. You built something real, and I'm proud to carry it forward." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. I had lost everything, but my son had given it all back, and more. I hugged him, tears streaming down my face. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. "Not for the money, for the man you've become." I'm 63 now. I wake up to the sound of birds, not boardroom buzz. My apartment is modest, 2 bedrooms, a small porch, and a coffee machine that still sputters like an old truck. But it's peaceful. And peace, I've learned, is worth more than any stock portfolio. Jacob visits often. He brings coffee, stories from his company, and sometimes just silence. We sit together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and I feel something I hadn't felt in years: contentment. He's not just successful, he's wise. He treats his employees with respect, builds technology that helps small businesses, and never forgets where he came from. He tells me, "Dad, I learned from your mistakes and your strength." I smile. That's all I ever wanted. Daniel? He disappeared from the headlines. Last I heard, he tried launching a startup that failed within months. Elise moved to Europe, living off what little she could salvage. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I just hope they learn what I did. Character is everything. Sometimes I walk past the old Carter Freight building. It has a new name now. JMC Logistics. But the foundation is still mine. I built it with sweat, sacrifice, and dreams. and Jacob rebuilt it with integrity. I've started writing my memoir, not for fame, but for truth. I want people to know that success isn't a straight line. It's messy, painful, and often lonely. But if you hold on to your values, if you raise your children with love, if you face betrayal with grace, redemption will find you. So here I am, a man who lost everything and gained more than he ever imagined. Not millions, but meaning.